Alright, welcome back everyone. So last week we covered the Brave New World novel. Today we're talking about the 1998 adaptation made for NBC. And you better believe I'm still wearing the shirt. I wasn't gonna prop myself up on my... I spat at my camera. I'm not gonna try propping myself up on the chair again because we know how well that worked last time. How well is that coming through? Whoa! We don't need too much introduction, so let's just head right on into this. This movie, as I said, was made in 1998 for NBC, was directed by Leslie Libman, best known for directing a few episodes of Homicide: Life on the Streets, The 4400, and NCIS. Bernard is played by Peter Gallagher of the OC fame, and this is actually not the first time he and Libman have worked together. In 1997, they made a movie on the World Trade Center bombings, and it aired on HBO. Lenita is played by, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, so I apologize. But anyways, she is played by Rhea Kihlstedt, and one may recognize her from Home Alone 3 or from Dexter. John is played by, and again, I apologize for getting the name wrong probably, John Guinee. Guinee has been on Hell on Wheels, The Good Wife, and was in Iron Man's 1 and 2. And Mustafa Mann is played by the late Leonard Nimoy, who I believe needs no introduction.
Same Bilbo Baggins, he's only 3 feet tall. Bilbo Baggins, the bravest little hobbit of them all.
Oh, and that song, whenever that's stuck in my head, I'm like, I'm just singing it. Bilbo Baggins. Wait, that's Davy Crockett. Like, I get it mixed up with the Davy Crockett. Bilbo Baggins, just a hobbit of the squire. That could work better, but it doesn't matter. Moving on. Alright, so I popped in the Blu-ray and I'm gonna get it Oh, I gotta wait. It's loading. Okay. Or the menu restart. So this must be the cursor. So we just go ahead and hit play and the movie starts. And the beginning of this is pretty similar to the novel. A group of children are being led on a tour of the hatching center, but instead of being directed by the director, they are instead being led by Lenita, who is their teacher.
I don't understand. How were children decanted in the old days?
Children weren't decanted. They were born. After a man and a woman had sex, the woman would get pregnant and then give birth.
And I gotta say, these kids acting... well, they chew the scenery a lot. However, I believe they're citizens of this world more than any of the adult actors. They may be overselling it, but they are more convincing than anybody else. Now, on Lenita, I find it a little confusing on how she finds time, as she is not only there during the day, but also there during the night. And during the night, she sees a child struggling to sleep, and drugs them with some soma. It's never explicitly said that it's soma, but it just seems logical. The director of the hatcheries is played by this J.K. Simmons knockoff, or the late Miguel Ferrer, and it actually turns out that the Delta and Gamma workforces are unhappy. And in this, Bernard is part of a team whose job it is, well, he's still in charge of hypnopathic messaging, but he is also in charge of happiness. Worker happiness. One of Bernard's coworkers is played by Daniel Day Kim, who I kind of forgot was in this. I actually bought this on Blu-ray sometimes back, watched it, kind of forgot about it. Well, I didn't forget about it, it's just kind of like that, but anyways, I forgot a lot of the details. Bernard suggests that instead of just conditioning the workforce, perhaps they should try to figure out why the workforce is unhappy, so that they can actually improve the conditioning.
How happy they are. We might figure out what makes them unhappy and design conditioning to help them.
Marks, please, don't turn shoddy performance into an attack on our whole program.
And although I feel like this is totally reasonable, it is shot down. Bernard's other coworker, played by... I can't actually tell you because... the actor's name wasn't on the Wikipedia page for this, and this is what IMDb's been looking like on my computer for months now. Actually, it's even looking like this on my new build. Don't know what that's about, but yeah. Anyways, he and Bernard are talking, and he offers Bernard a soma, but in true Bernard fashion, Bernard turns it down. His coworker, however, decides to down one, and instantaneously goes into a soma holiday. And I've got to ask, really? Have neither the actor or the director ever had to take Advil for a headache? Because, that takes a while to kick in. Oral medications take a while to kick in. Instead of talking in a locker room, Lenita and Fanny are talk together in a spin class, which this world has spin classes apparently. And here we get a conversation similar to the one that they have in the novel. Fanny chastises Lenita for being monogamous, but instead of being monogamous with Henry Foster, she has been monogamous with Bernard. Now, in this, Bernard is actually not a social outcast. He's actually respected in this. And other than wanting to know why the workforce is unhappy, no one considers him unorthodox. There's no talk of alcohol in his decanter, so this is a major departure for him. Now, before we can really start the plot proper and send these two to the reservation, we first have to see an assembly line full of Delta workers, where one Delta worker pulls out a mouse and starts playing with it, causing production to slow.
Get back to work. I said back to work. What's in your hand?
And although he is taken away for reconditioning, his supervisor doesn't seem to care that he just totally passes the mouse onto somebody else to be distracted by. You know, you would think if it could distract him, it could distract her, but I guess they just don't care. And now, I'm not going to say that the movie does this plot well, but I do like that it is here. One thing that the book does leave out that I personally want to know more about is the lower caste. We really don't learn that much about them during the course of the novel. I really want to know, do the lower castes really have a major life difference? Well, I mean, they do because, you know, they're part of different castes, but do they play escalator squash? Do they do these absurd recreational activities too? I mean, none of this is answered in here, but at least there's some focus on the lower castes. Now here, people are living on the reservations not because the lands were barren, but because the people living on the lands refused to assimilate. Now, a major difference, which I'm going to say that a few more times in here. I've already said it a few times, I'm sure. I'm going to say it a lot more times. But one difference in this is they actually don't plan on going into the reservation. Instead, they just want to cruise over it like, boo. But the helicopter is brought down when these people here throw some stones at them and totally miss the helicopter. Crashes anyway. After their emergency landing, Lenita, Bernard, and the helicopter pilot are approached by a group of youths who look like they got lost on their way to a rave.
Had a little accident, as you probably can see. We sure could use a little help.
Who go ahead and harass the group.
That's enough. Now leave us alone.
After the youths have started attacking them, the two are saved by John. I'm not going to say that Tim Guinee does a wonderful job as John, but comparatively, he is far better than the two main leads.
Sleep and knits at the reveled sleeve of care.
We should go. I'll get you to my mother's.
What did you just say?
From Macbeth, Shakespeare.
And unlike the novel, hey, what did I say? That's going to come up a few times. There we go again. But anyways, unlike the novel, Linda is actually not from the world state, but is from the reservation. What happened was that she began a tryst with a border agent who did bring her into the world state, but after she became pregnant, left her and the child to be in the reservation.
Linda got him. Mostly from my father.
Oh, of course. Of course, you'd...
I never knew him. He was one of you.
He was one of us?
He worked at the border center. And she was just a girl. And maybe she flirted with him. He gave her presents. Told her she was sexier than any of the girls in Paris or New York. He seduced her. And took her over to the other side. Showed her the Soma bars. When she got pregnant, he dumped her back here.
Lenita and Bernard are able to get some emergency help, and in addition to bringing themselves back to civilization, they also bring John and Linda. Now, of course, I understand why John is brought back to civilization, since his father is part of the world state. One can argue that he has a birthright to it. Linda, on the other hand, I don't exactly see why she's being brought there. She's not of world state descent, and she was never a citizen of the world state. She visited a few times, but
Are you married?
I don't know. It just seems a little
You got a lot to learn about civilization, John.
dumb? After bringing John back to civilized world, Bernard brings John to his work, which I'm not entirely sure if his work is actually at the hatching center. His boss is still the hatching director, but these are offices. I mean, they could very well be part of the same building, but I'm just not sure. But while John is there, he meets Daniel Day Kim, his father, but nobody knows he's his father yet, and Mustafa Mond, who, kind of looks like he should be dropping acid with the Beatles and Dewey Cox right now. The controller is thrilled to meet John and invites him and Bernard to a party. Okay, so remember how I said I like that they had the plot with the deltas and the gammas? Well, I'm standing by it, as it actually allows us to see reconditioning, something that's mentioned in the books, but never explained. I'm not exactly going to say I'm thrilled with the payoff, though, as this just kind of looks like a dull Ludovico technique. Okay, so again, like in the books, John is a very big deal. People are fascinated by him, and he's invited to all the big events. While John, Lenina, and Bernard are at a party, Mustafa Mond approaches Bernard, and they have a discussion about John. And unlike the book, we actually find out that Mustafa Mond enjoys antiquities at this point in the story. It's just a discussion about John, about his research, so on and so forth. Now, one thing I do have to say, I never picked this up in the novel, but Mustafa Mond kind of feels very irresponsible here. He very well may be just the same in the book, but maybe it's just seeing him in prayer beads that makes me think, wow, maybe this guy shouldn't be making decisions right now. Having the controller's blessing to study John, Bernard begins to do trials on him, and credit where it is due, I love this line.
5 minutes, we'll have a complete genetic portrait of you.
I can hardly wait for you to tell me all about myself.
In addition to testing John's genetics, Bernard also puts him through the Ludovico technique. But in true John fashion, he gets tired of all the attention that he gets. Oh hey, you can see audacity in my spaceship, or my Epcot's photo there. I just noticed that. Nice. He begins to realize that the civilized world is nothing like what he had thought, and that he is nothing more than a sideshow to these people. In an attempt to try to cheer John up, Lenita proposes that the two of them go somewhere more private. John, however, declines. So Bernard for the rebound. Next is what is probably the biggest change that this adaptation made. But the hatchery director in this is full-on villain. Knowing that John's genetics would be traced back to him, he deletes his profile from the DNA database. Now, this might not sound too villainous, but it gets much better. So much better. Now, remember that Delta worker that came in for reconditioning earlier? Well, the director decides to change his programming. Instead of making him a perfect Delta worker, he instead programs him to kill Bernard, and this scene is just so balls to the wall crazy that I love it.
Deserves to die, slave, I hate you, kill, criminal, antisocial, liar, laughing at you, destroy, kill, Bernard Marx, Bernard Marx, Bernard Marx.
Now, of course, it does make sense that this film needs a villain. I mean, the book doesn't really have an antagonist. I have heard that's a bit hard to get into, so it does make sense that this plot is here. Oh, and before we move on, dude's name is Tomakin. The book, his name was Thomas. Tomakin was just something that Linda called him, but in this, straight up Tomakin. Oh, and just because I don't want to skip too much without saying something, There's a quick scene where Bernard and John argue their philosophies. Not a lot to add, as I feel the book does an adequate job of describing their philosophies. Moving on. Bernard has tried to figure out who John's dad is, but much to our surprise, the file is gone. And so here we are introduced to the best character.
There are no matches. Check again. Well, the DNA sample I gave you has got to match one of the men that worked at the reservation at that time.
I have checked, and it doesn't.
Have you examined every possibility?
Are you saying I'm incompetent? Would you like to file a complaint?
No.
This beta male clerk. And now I'm not calling him a beta male to try to be insulting, but instead he is male, and he is a beta. Thus, he is a beta male. And this guy is just not having it from Bernard. His attitude is just fabulous. Although his attitude is a little misplaced, as he is aware that there is a file missing. After Bernard strokes the clerk's ego a little bit, the clerk does decide to help Bernard as much as he can. Now, some of you may have noticed a complete lack of Helmholtz Watson. He's not introduced at this point. He's still gone. He's never in this. Instead of Helmholtz and John having their conversation on Shakespeare, Lenita has John to speak to her class, which is just a frickin' dumb idea. She's in charge of their conditioning. But anyways, he tries to tell them about Shakespeare, including Romeo and Juliet. Instead of Helmholtz laughing at him over the idea, it is instead these kids. Their acting is still very scenery chewing. Still better than most of the adults.
What's so great about him? I didn't understand it. Was it in a dead language like French or German? What's it about?
Romeo and Juliet are a boy and girl, you know, about your age right now, maybe a little older, and they're in love, but their families are enemies.
In love with what?
With each other.
After class, John and Lenita have a discussion on the value of Shakespeare, but I can't really focus too much on this conversation as I'm paying attention to the punching balloons, because those are fun. I loved those punching balloons as a kid. Just pop, 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 pop. I need to see if I can find some of those. After realizing that his attempts to reach people on a deeper level have failed, John then kisses Lenita. But after Lenita gets into it, John walks away lamenting that this is not love.
What is love?
This isn't love.
Causing Lenita to be quite shook. As if it wasn't bad that he were emotionally defeated, John comes home to find his mother unconscious. The doctor informs him that the level of soma that Linda has consumed is dangerous to those who are not acclimated to it, and that he's not very certain if she'll live. Lenita and John stay by her side until she regains some level of consciousness. After they leave the room, Lenita tells John that she's coming around to the idea of being a mother. Which, I don't know, this kind of reminds me of Wendy and Peter Pan. Like, at the beginning, she doesn't want to grow up, then she becomes a mother to the Lost Boys, so, you know, in a way. So she's okay with growing up now. I guess John is Peter to Lenita's Wendy. Lenita asks John to stay the night, and he agrees? The relationship is actually left a little ambiguous. There's then a scene of Bernard talking to a council, which the council's actually been here a few times before already. I just don't feel like those scenes have added a lot. Here, Tomakin accuses Bernard, John, and Linda of lying about John's ancestry so that John and Linda can come to the world state. Bond seems to be okay with letting this continue, and we then get a scene where Bernard confronts Lenita about how she feels about Bernard and how she feels about John. And this really doesn't work in the world of Brave New World. It works for Bernard's characterization in the novel, sure, but Bernard here more or less seems to be more or less an ideal world state citizen. So him being jealous over the possibility of multiple lovers doesn't make a lot of sense. Lenita answers that she's more fascinated by John, as John makes her feel like she is needed, something that Bernard just does not do. As Bernard is returning to his apartment, we find the Delta worker stalking him, but he turns away when there is potential witnesses. Once Bernard enters his apartment, he goes on video call with the clerk, who says he cannot find the file, but he is going to ask some other branches organizations, departments, that's the word, departments, that the clerk's going to ask some other departments if they have the missing files, and then Bernard is attacked by the Delta worker. But before the Delta worker is able to kill Bernard, he actually has a bit of a freak out and tries to jump out a window, but this isn't actually a window, it's just a video screen. While this is happening, the clerk is able to get the file from another clerk and clutches it tight to his chest like the precious item that it is. But they do not catch Tomakin in time, as Tomakin goes to kill Linda. Now, he does this by talking Linda into overdosing on Soma, and it kind of doesn't make sense to me that he kills Linda. Linda didn't seem to be any issue here. She didn't seem interested in outing Tomakin. She didn't seem to be in the right state of mind for outing Tomakin. There's just kind of no reason for him to kill her. Well, I mean, except to make him really villainous. So, I'm guessing that's why they have it, to make him super villainous. When John goes to see his mother's corpse, things play out in a manner similar to the book. John is upset, John is chastised for being upset, and John causes a Soma riot. Major difference here, no Helmholtz in the scene, no Bernard in the scene. The council has reconvened, and it seems that they have decided that John is just too much of a danger to allow to stay in society. Which, duh. Just duh. But after Bernard leaves the meeting, he is greeted by the clerk, who hands him over the file, and he gives it to Mond. And the director is then arrested, sent for reconditioning, and he loses his job. John and Mond have more or less the same conversation that they did in the book, but Mond does say that he is quite fond of John in this.
I like him.
John decides that he wants to seek solitude, but soon the paparazzi finds him. In another change from the book, John does not die by his own hand, but instead by losing his footing over a cliff. Having seen the man that they brought into civilization die, Bernard and Lenita decide to pork, which in fairness does make sense to this world. It's just, if they had not brought John back, he'd still be alive. So in my eyes, that places his death on them. After Tomakin loses his job, Bernard is instead placed in charge of the hatching center, but Lenita informs him that she is pregnant with his child. Not only that, but that she is going into isolation so that she can raise the child. Bernard tries to continue living life as the director, but he is troubled. When he is set to meet with Mond, he decides to leave civilization and decides to go into isolation with Lenita and their newborn child. Back at the conditioning center, we once again see the child who had trouble sleeping earlier, but this time he plugs his ears up so as to block the hypnopathic messaging out. Of course, the movie leaves out the scene where the teacher watching over them comes in, rips those earplugs out, and force feeds him Soma. But, I guess we gotta leave on a happy ending? So that was the 1998 adaptation of Brave New World. Is it good? No. It does not really prove it really doesn't. It really does the novel injustice. And, as I've mentioned, the novel was kind of a life changer for me. And somebody's was asking me about the novel one time. They're like, so is that a good book? And I'm like, oh, yes, it is. I'm like, do you want me to lend you the copy? And they're like, no, my eyesight's kind of bad. I need large print books. No, I'm not going to read it. I'm like, oh, okay. I have the made-for-TV movie if you want to watch that, but it's complete and utter crap. But they went ahead and watched it anyway, and when they got it back to me, they're like, this is what changed your life? And I'm like, no. The book changed my life. This movie is crap. And ultimately, that right there is where I would, is probably the best indication that this is crap. It's not nearly as powerful as the book is. Obviously it changes with different people reading it, the book, but this movie just leave something to be desired. Alright, so that's gonna do it for this video. I'll be back next week. I'm not 100% sure what the video is on. Yeah, you know what? It's gonna be a game show video. Yeah, it's gonna be a game show video. I'm not gonna say what. Actually, I shouldn't even say it's gonna be a game show video in the odd chance that it's not. But it's been a while since I've done a game show video, I think it seems. So I need to get one of those done in the near future. But anyways, thanks for joining, everyone. I do actually want to look at more books and their adaptations in the future. I don't know what I'm going to do next or when I'm going to do it next, but it's something I'm going to do in the future. So if you'd like to see those, maybe, you know, subscribe. And if you like this, like. And if you have anything to say, comment. But thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. Remember that you are valid. Bye-bye.